that celebrations are magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
The monarchy is at a moment where every move carries weight. King Charles has now delivered his second address, yet the focus has unexpectedly turned to Catherine. Reports suggest she has been declared Queen Consort, a step that could reshape the balance within the royal household. The timing could not be more striking, as Camilla faces a crisis that threatens her place beside the king. People everywhere are asking what this means for the future of the crown. Could Catherine's new role change everything? Join us as we uncover Catherine being declared Queen Consort amid Camilla's crisis. A royal transition. September 2025 became one of the busiest months for the royal family, as Windsor Castle opened its gates with all the pomp and ceremony of a full state visit. The guest was none other than U.S. President Donald Trump, making his second official visit to Britain.
This is Windsor Castle. This is an historic state visit by President Trump and the First Lady. You can see them both standing right there next to King Charles and Queen Camilla at Windsor Castle.
The carriages, the red carpets, the marching bands. It was everything the world expects when Britain wants to display tradition and power. Cameras followed every step, and the images filled news headlines from Washington to London. At the center of it all stood King Charles and Queen Camilla. They greeted President Trump and his wife Melania at Windsor in a show of unity. Yet even as the crowds cheered, there were questions about Camilla's health. The Queen had been forced to cancel earlier appearances, with the palace saying she was suffering from sinus infection. This was not the first time Camilla had been missing from key moments. People began to notice how tired she looked, how her recovery seemed slower than expected. People began to ask, could the Queen Consort truly manage the pace of royal life? The visit itself was huge. Trump was never one to keep things quiet. His style was bold, and his words were just as loud. The state banquet in St. George's Hall drew in senior politicians, business leaders, and diplomats. Reports spoke of billion-dollar investment talks and new deals in technology and trade. But even in the middle of all this diplomacy, eyes turned again to the royals. Camilla appeared at only selected events. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped in more often, greeting guests and making sure the royal presence never felt thin. Observers noticed. Then, just days after Trump's plane left London, King Charles delivered what became the second major speech of his reign. This came after a grand but tiring state visit, and in the middle of renewed concern over Camilla's health. The palace knew the country was watching. Charles spoke about the strength of ties between Britain and America. He praised the success of Trump's visit. But then his words grew more personal. He spoke about the strain of royal duty, about health challenges in his own family, and about the need to look forward. And that is when he turned to Catherine. He did not wait for the distant future. He named her clearly as the one who would be Queen Consort. The king's words drew a line between ceremony and reality. They left no doubt that Catherine was stepping into a role that had once been reserved for Camilla. And in doing so, the speech tied together the grandeur of a U.S. state visit and the quiet crisis inside the royal household. The crowd that heard it felt the weight of what was said. And the country, still thinking of the images from Windsor, began to see the monarchy in a different light. When King Charles spoke, many could not help but remember his first address 3 years earlier. That speech, delivered in September 2022, came within hours of Queen Elizabeth II's death. The memory of that moment is still vivid. A nation was in mourning, and Charles stood before the world to pay tribute to his mother. His words promised lifelong service. He confirmed for the first time that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort. That announcement had once been divisive, but the steady years that followed brought wider acceptance. In the same breath, he raised William and Catherine to the titles of Prince and Princess of Wales. That first address was measured and respectful. It looked back to a reign that had lasted 70 years, but it also placed markers for the future. The monarchy, Charles said, would continue through the next generation. At the time, those words felt like ceremonial duty. People nodded, remembered Elizabeth, and moved on. The second address, however, carried a different weight. It came not in sorrow, but in a season of strain. The tone was more urgent, the message more pointed. This was not simply about tradition, it was about survival. Charles acknowledged the challenges facing the monarchy, shifting public opinion, the toll of his own health, and the questions now surrounding Camilla. He spoke as a man aware of limits, not as a monarch untouched by time. And then came the shift. Instead of centering on himself or even on Camilla, he directed the nation's gaze to William and Catherine. His language was deliberate. He did not speak of someday or in the future. He described Catherine's role in present terms, stressing that she was already stepping into the duties of a Queen Consort. It was a clear signal. Observers quickly drew comparisons between the two speeches. In 2022, Charles had gone to great lengths to include Camilla, to defend her position, to settle a debate that had lingered for decades. In 2025, his words suggested a new calculation. He praised Catherine's empathy, her charitable focus, and her public service. He framed her as central to the continuity of the crown. It was not a dismissal of Camilla, but it was a repositioning. For many, it felt like the natural progression of what had begun years earlier. When William and Catherine married in 2011, Catherine took her time to find her place. Over the years, she built a reputation as dependable, warm, and tireless in causes like early childhood development and mental health. By the time Charles elevated her to Princess of Wales, she was already carrying much of the family's public workload. The events of 2024 and 2025 only sped that up. The palace may have hoped that these transitions would unfold slowly, but health setbacks changed the pace. The message was simple. Continuity rests with William and Catherine. For the first time, the monarchy's long-term future was not just hinted at. It was spoken out loud, with Catherine's role placed firmly in view. The big question now is, how much did the palace's health issues trigger this turn of events? Health's shadow. By the time Charles gave his second address, health problems were already casting a shadow over the royal family. His own diagnosis of cancer in early 2024 had shaken public confidence. The palace never gave every detail, but it confirmed enough to make people worry. Treatment had forced him to scale back some engagements, and for the first time, the image of a monarch fully in command looked fragile. William had stepped forward more often, and Catherine alongside him, covering visits and ceremonies that once would have fallen directly to the king. That concern only deepened in 2025 when Camilla's illness began to show its toll. Officially, the palace described the Queen's condition as acute sinusitis, but her absence at certain high-profile moments told a different story. The most notable was the funeral of the Duchess of Kent. Many had expected the Queen Consort to be there, standing beside Charles in a show of respect. When she pulled out, whispers quickly spread that her recovery was not as simple as first suggested. Behind palace walls, reports began to leak. Some mentioned fatigue, others spoke of a slow return to strength. Nothing was confirmed, but the pattern was there for everyone to see. One event missed here, another appearance shortened there. Royal watchers knew the signs, and speculation grew about whether Camilla could continue at the pace the role demanded. It was in this atmosphere that Charles's second address took on its deeper meaning. To some, it sounded like reassurance. To others, it was almost a strategic move. By publicly affirming Catherine's qualities, Charles was doing more than offering praise. He was setting out a plan for continuity. He praised her compassion and her steady work across the country. He pointed to her ability to connect with people, to balance royal duty with family life. These were not casual compliments. They were deliberate markers of someone being readied for a larger role. This was not the first time the monarchy had been forced to adjust around health challenges. Queen Elizabeth herself had scaled back in her later years, gradually passing duties to Charles. But what made this moment different was the pace. Two senior figures, the king and the Queen Consort, were facing health concerns within the same window of time. That made it impossible for the palace to simply continue with business as usual. Adjustments had to be made, and Catherine's prominence became the clearest sign of that adjustment. For the public, the message was both reassuring and sobering. Reassuring because it showed there was a plan. Sobering because it reminded everyone that the current king and queen consort were not untouchable. Their health, like anyone's, could falter. And in that reality, Catherine's role became more than symbolic. She was now central to the idea of the monarchy's stability. The September state visit of President Donald Trump was described by many as a spectacle of diplomacy and alliances. For King Charles, it was a chance to show that Britain remained linked to its global partners. For Trump, it was an opportunity to push investment and trade, and the outcome reflected both goals. The visit was marked by billion-dollar agreements in technology and energy, showing how much both sides valued business as much as ceremony. Behind the numbers, however, the event carried a deeper weight. It became a test for the monarchy itself, already facing questions about health and succession. Trump's flamboyant style was impossible to ignore. His speeches were blunt, his movements full of energy, and his presence often dominated the room. As usual, supporters applauded him for being direct, while critics noted that his approach sometimes clashed with the more measured style of the royal household. Still, Charles appeared determined to make the most of the visit, using it to underline continuity and stability. What caught even more attention, though, was that Catherine stood out in a remarkable way. She was visible at almost every event, meeting guests, sharing warm exchanges, and stepping into roles usually handled by Camilla. Foreign dignitaries praised her charm, and the press highlighted how naturally she filled the space. The difference was clear. Camilla was nowhere to be seen, while Catherine stood firmly in the spotlight. For Charles, this visit provided both a challenge and an opening. On the one hand, the Queen's health troubles could not be hidden. On the other hand, Catherine's strong showing allowed him to signal the future direction of the monarchy without saying it outright. Guests noticed, the press reported it, and the public drew its own conclusions. The king tied the success of the diplomatic visit to the strength of the royal family, making the connection between Britain's alliances abroad and the stability of its monarchy at home. It was a deliberate move, an effort to show that even if Camilla's role weakened, the institution itself remained strong through William and Catherine. The effects of this visit became a stage for Britain to project unity while preparing for inevitable changes. Trump came for business and left with contracts, but the monarchy used the moment to remind the world of its long game: succession, continuity, and the steady hand of those waiting in the wings. And as Catherine stepped in more visibly, the question of what this meant for the monarchy was only just beginning. Redefining the modern monarchy. As the state visit ended, what the public wanted to know was simple. What was wrong with Queen Camilla? Her limited appearances had not gone unnoticed, and within hours of the banquet at Windsor, social media platforms were flooded with speculation. Commentators compared her reduced schedule to earlier moments when members of the royal family had slowly stepped back before permanent withdrawal. The tabloids, always quick to seize on uncertainty, ran with bold headlines. Some questioned if her health had been downplayed, Others suggested that the palace was holding back information. Even measured outlets noted that the acute sinusitis story did not fully explain the pattern of cancellations and absences stretching back months. The frenzy reached its peak just before the palace intervened. A formal statement confirmed that Camilla was recovering well and that her doctors were satisfied with her progress. It was clear the aim was to calm nerves before Trump's arrival. And for a short while, it worked. The reassurance gave her the space to appear at the state banquet, which helped balance the narrative. But the calm did not last. Behind the scenes, leaks told a more complicated story. Reports suggested her recovery had been slow and that she was struggling with fatigue. That forced a wider discussion about whether she could continue in the demanding role of Queen Consort. The leaks were not wild guesses. They came from voices usually close to palace staff, the kind of sources who understand the pressure of the daily schedule. They painted a picture of a queen doing her best, but finding the pace increasingly difficult. That added weight to speculation and gave the press more fuel to question her long-term capacity. At this point, many revisited Charles's second speech and noticed that while he paid tribute to Camilla's strength, he shifted much of the focus onto William and Catherine. It was a gentle but deliberate move. He spoke warmly of Catherine's qualities, her readiness, and her place beside William as they prepared for the future. Observers picked up on the balance. It was not a rejection of Camilla, nor was it an announcement of any change. But it was enough to suggest that the king was aware of the growing conversation and wanted to provide reassurance. By highlighting Catherine in such a public way, Charles gave the public and the press something else to talk about. For those who had followed the frenzy online, this subtle turn in his speech mattered. It was a way of calming the waters without making any formal declarations. He acknowledged the reality of concern, while also showing that the institution had another strong figure ready to take on more responsibility. In the end, the speech and the leaks worked together to shape public opinion. The frenzy proved how quickly royal health can dominate attention, but it also gave the palace a chance to reposition the conversation. Instead of endless speculation about decline, people began debating Catherine's growing role. As the focus on Camilla's health continued, Catherine's position within the royal family became even clearer. For years, she had been preparing quietly, building a record of steady work and consistent visibility. Her work in the area of early childhood has been one of her most defining projects. Through the Royal Foundation's Center for Early Childhood, launched in 2021, she has championed research and community initiatives around child development. The program has grown into a key part of her identity as a royal, drawing praise from educators and health professionals alike. It is not just charity visits. It is long-term policy shaping, with real investment in families and children across Britain. Beyond early years, she has maintained active roles in mental health campaigns. Partnering with organizations like Heads Together, Catherine has spoken about reducing stigma, encouraging open conversations, and promoting support systems. These campaigns, often done with William and Prince Harry in earlier years, remain a central pillar of her work. The commitments give Catherine a clear platform, showing the public and the wider world that she is not waiting for a title to act. She has already defined a focus, proven her stamina, and set the tone for what her reign as Queen Consort could look like. Her international presence has also been carefully built. From visits to the United States to tours across the Commonwealth, Catherine has been consistent in her ability to connect with audiences abroad. Diplomats often note her calm and approachable manner, which contrasts with the sometimes polarizing energy of political figures. This matters deeply at a time when the monarchy is trying to remain relevant beyond the UK's borders. In recent months, as Camilla scaled back, Catherine's public role increased. She represented the crown at events ranging from health initiatives to cultural ceremonies, stepping in seamlessly where gaps appeared. Her visibility during Trump's visit reinforced this further. She engaged directly with business leaders, foreign dignitaries, and even the press in ways that reminded many of the late Queen Elizabeth's style: steady, gracious, and assured. Observers pointed out that her role at Windsor during the state banquet was more than ceremonial. She spoke to American delegates about early childhood programs, framing the work as part of Britain's broader international outlook. This blending of royal duty with her personal project gave the sense of a future queen who knows how to tie family service to global diplomacy. The contrast with Camilla became more striking as the weeks went on. While Camilla fought fatigue, Catherine showed strength. While one Queen Consort struggled with the demands of the role, the other consort-in-waiting seemed already to be carrying parts of it. For the public, it was impossible not to notice the difference. Inside the palace, aides were careful to frame Catherine's visibility as support, not substitution. But for those outside, the optics told their own story. Catherine was not just filling in, she was leading, and her works provided a roadmap for what the monarchy might look like once her time as queen arrived. And as her presence grew clearer, attention began shifting to William, the man beside her. The Prince of the Future. As Catherine's work came into focus, attention also turned to Prince William. For many, he is not just the heir to the throne, but the bridge between the traditions of the past and the expectations of the future. His visibility during this period reinforced the sense that the monarchy is preparing carefully for what comes next. William's role has long been defined by duty, but in recent years it has gained more weight. Since becoming Prince of Wales in 2022, his responsibilities have grown to include not only domestic issues, but also global diplomacy. He is expected to represent the crown in ways that keep Britain's influence visible, even when political winds shift. During Trump's visit, William was seen guiding conversations with business leaders, diplomats, and guests, complementing Catherine's charm with his own focus on security and environmental issues. His commitment to climate change has been one of his clearest trademarks. Through the Earthshot Prize, launched in 2020, William has placed environmental innovation at the heart of his platform. The prize has gained international respect, drawing partnerships from governments, corporations, and activists alike. This gives William a unique voice among world leaders, and it signals a monarchy willing to engage with the most pressing global challenges. While Camilla's health struggles sparked questions, William's steadiness brought reassurance. Observers noted how he carried himself with calm authority, supporting both his father and Catherine at key moments. In times of uncertainty, it is often the heir who must project confidence, and William has done just that. Beyond environmental issues, William's patronages and advocacy for mental health have shaped his public image. Like Catherine, he has worked to reduce stigma around mental illness, speaking openly about his own struggles with grief after losing his mother, Princess Diana. This honesty has connected him with younger generations who want authenticity from leaders. It has also shown that the monarchy can adapt, presenting figures who are not distant symbols, but relatable human beings. At home, William balances his public duties with family life. As a father to George, Charlotte, and Louis, he often emphasizes the importance of fatherhood, something he ties directly to his royal role. His public comments about parenting are not scripted formalities. They reflect his belief that strong families are central to strong communities. This message echoes Catherine's work, and together, they project an image of partnership that strengthens the monarchy's relevance. The contrast with Charles and Camilla at this moment is clear. Where the king and queen are facing the limits of age and health, William and Catherine offer energy, youth, and resilience. It is not about replacing one generation overnight, but about showing that the crown is ready for the future. The public sees it, commentators note it, and the palace carefully allows that image to take shape. During and after Trump's visit, William's strength became even more important. While Catherine stepped forward into roles usually associated with the Queen, William reinforced the line of succession by demonstrating readiness for leadership. His presence beside his father at Windsor and in follow-up meetings gave the impression of stability. It was as though Charles was not standing alone, but already preparing the ground for the next reign. For King Charles, moments like the Trump visit are more than diplomatic milestones. They are reminders that time is not on his side. At 76, his reign is already shorter than that of his mother, or even his grandfather. That reality shapes how he frames every public event, tying it not only to Britain's place in the world, but also to the continuity of the monarchy. One of the clearest signs of this came after the American delegation left. In his speech, Charles looked back at the week not as a passing occasion, but as a reflection of where the monarchy stands. He noted the alliances reaffirmed, the role of his son and daughter-in-law in guiding conversations, and even the strain placed on Queen Camilla. Without saying it directly, he placed himself in the role of a bridge, acknowledging his responsibility now while preparing the ground for what comes after. Unlike his mother, who spent much of her reign avoiding public reflection on her own mortality, Charles has been more open in allowing legacy to enter the conversation. This is partly because he waited longer than any heir in history to become monarch. It is also because he knows the public has always measured him against the memory of Elizabeth II. For decades, questions lingered over whether he could ever achieve her level of devotion. His answer has been to place succession at the heart of his reign, something few monarchs have done so deliberately. That approach explains why Catherine's visibility and William's preparation are not just personal matters, but central parts of Charles's message. He has learned from his mother's example of steady continuity, but he also realizes the monarchy cannot rely on silence alone in an age of 24-hour news and constant speculation. By openly involving the next generation, he reassures the public that the crown is not simply an institution resting on one pair of shoulders. It is a chain of responsibility, already being carried by those who will follow. His approach also reflects his lifelong interest in causes that outlast individuals. From the environment to urban planning to interfaith dialogue, Charles has often been criticized for being too outspoken as Prince of Wales. As king, he has scaled back those direct interventions. But the thread remains. He is more concerned with planting seeds than with chasing short-term praise. When he brings Catherine and William into the spotlight, it is an extension of that same outlook, making sure that the groundwork is laid for them to thrive long after his reign ends. Legacy for Charles is not only about family. It is also about how the monarchy adapts to a changing Britain. In a nation where Republican voices grow louder and where economic pressures sharpen debates over the cost of the crown, he has chosen a careful balance. On one hand, he emphasizes tradition, ceremony, alliances, state visits, the image of continuity. On the other, he subtly trims the institution, making it leaner, more focused on service, and less indulgent than in past decades. It is a gamble. Too much tradition, and the monarchy risks seeming outdated. Too much reform, and it risks losing its unique identity. Charles's reign is about walking that narrow line. As he looks ahead, his legacy will likely rest on two pillars. The first is whether he manages to secure a smooth transition, making William and Catherine not just accepted but embraced as the new faces of monarchy. The second is whether he leaves behind a clear sense of purpose for the institution itself. His speeches already show this preoccupation. He ties diplomacy to succession, public service to the future, and even personal challenges to the resilience of the family as a whole. In that sense, the Trump visit was not merely a diplomatic affair. It was a stage for Charles to demonstrate that the monarchy remains functional, visible, and ready for what comes next. What do you think of the way Charles is shaping his legacy? Do you believe William and Catherine are ready to step up when the time comes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.